Bif totally lets us down. No, I'm just kidding. Well, Jay Baba, everybody. And Diane, you look beautiful. We love you. We're sending you love and healing energy. Um, you're muted, but I'm sure you were saying something sweet. Well, we have a very special guest, a returning guest to this episode of the Late Night Chat with Margi Connor. And it used to be Peter Goodman, but he lives on the East Coast and it's hard. Anyway, so Bif is here once again. And then for those of you who didn't come on when Bif was here before, he told his Baba story and then also gave a virtual tour of some of the sites that are around Maharashtra that Baba went to. So Bif, I forget how many years it is, Bif. Is it 30 years that you've lived in Meherabad? Oh, wait, you're muted. Bif's wearing my favorite shirt of his. Yeah, you're still muted. Let me see if I can ask to unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. But Bif, so how many years have you lived in Meherabad?
31 years.
31 years. And that's without leaving too, right?
No, I left once in 1996. I've been here continuously 28 years.
Wow, it's pretty impressive. So Bif had so much experience with the mandali. And so tonight he's going to tell some stories of Mehera. And then also, I mean, whatever other stories you want to share with us, Bif, I'm sure we'd love to hear, but I titled it Mehera Stories. So you got to tell at least one Mehera story. But it's all yours when you're ready for it.
Okay, well, you had requested Mehera stories, plural.
Yes.
So my whole focus is doing that, telling Mehera stories.
Good.
So it's 7:30 in the morning at Meherabad, and there's a beautiful sky out here. I'm up on the roof of the staff quarters, which I had to move to once we were kicked out of lower Meherabad by the government. And the building's quite nice, and it's just a block from the MPR, Meher Pilgrim Retreat. So that's setting the location.
Bif, how hot is it out?
Well, it's 7:30 in the morning, and it's quite pleasant, but it heats up very quickly. We've had 107 degrees, but that's around 3 in the afternoon is the hottest time. So hopefully it won't get too hot while we're having this sharing. So I like to say that the two greatest blessings in my life is one that I became Meher Baba's lover in 1968 when he was still living. So to know that God was on the earth the same time I was and living, for me was important and a great blessing. And later I heard of Mehera, and she remained at Meherazad for 20 years after Baba dropped the body. And to meet her and to be friends with her was my second greatest blessing in this life. And it was interesting, when I first became a Baba lover in 1968, I was totally focused on him. And I accepted what he said. He said, I am God in human form. It took me a while to get there to have that acceptance, but once I did, the whole focus of my life from that moment until now is just to get closer to him. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here at Meherabad, because for me, this is the best place for me to get closest to him. And so I was so focused on Baba back then in 1968 that I didn't think about the mandali and the others in his circle around him. And then in 1968 also, I moved to Santa Cruz to some friends that were renting a farm, a 4-acre farm below the new University of California at Santa Cruz, which is a very beautiful campus. And we had a little 4-acre farm that was about a mile below the campus. And it turned into a Baba commune. I was kind of the instigator because I was interested in the idea of communes. And so we were living there in this place that it got named Pepperland, was the name of the commune. And some of the people that ended up there and became Baba lovers at that time were Will David, Eric Nadel, and Charlie Keeler, also known as Charlie Chu. And others that were already Baba lovers would come through, like, let's see, who would you know? Beverly Smith was a Baba lover, Patrick Carlson, Jay Bonner, I think Heather Nadel, because she was girlfriends with Eric at that time, and others. And it was a very blessed place. Will David later, when he ended up living at Pepperland. And one time he described, he said, when I would, because he was working at this garden project up at the university, and then he'd come home in the evening, he'd walk home. And he said, when my feet touched the ground of Pepperland, I felt like I was in Meherabad. So Baba obviously blessed us at that time with a special blessing. And we were living there when Baba dropped the body. And there's lots of stories that happened at that time, but I'm going to focus the stories on Mehera. I'm drinking tea because my throat gets dry, so please excuse me. So I was wanting to go to, the last darshan, but it ended up that I didn't have enough money to go. And so that was a disappointment for me. But I did end up going to Meherabad and meeting Agnes Barron. And she made a big impact on my life. And I mentioned to her that I wanted to go to India to meet Baba's mandali. And her response was very sharply, she said, why do you want to go to India and bother the mandali? They're old and tired. Just stay here, do selfless service, and keep quiet. And I accepted what she said, but at the same time, I said, well, eventually I want to go to Meherabad and meet the mandali. And so in 1970, Will David had an inheritance from his grandmother. And so he decided to buy a ticket, around the world ticket for 10 days and spend 5 days here at Meherabad. And then in 1971, I think Eric Nadel and Heather and Charlie and Patrick Carlson and others, they also came here to Meherabad and spent quite a time here. And when they came back, they were talking about Mehera and how special she is. And so I became very intrigued all of a sudden that my heart opened up to the idea of who Mehera is. And one day I was just walking around the garden and I found a white feather. So spontaneously I decided to make a brooch. So I found a pretty pink ribbon and I attached the feather to the ribbon with a pin. And Charlie was going to India. So I gave him this little package and I said, give this to Mehera, which he very beautifully did. And in response, Mehera sent me a photograph of her and Baba. So, whoops. So, can you see this? This is the photo that she sent me. This is Baba up in Mahabaleshwar. You can see it, Margi?
Yeah, we can see it. It's very clear.
Okay, good. Yeah. So this is Baba up in Mahabaleshwar, and this is actually during the monsoon season. This is a flowing waterfall, and it's a picnic spot that Mehera's young girl, her father was a forester, and they had a little cabin up in Mahabaleshwar called Cozy Cottage, and they would have picnics in the pool of water below this waterfall. And later, Mehera got to bring, because Baba spent a lot of time in Mahabaleshwar, and Mehera was with him. And so she brought him to this picnic spot. And this photograph is taken during the dry season. So they're actually standing on some rocks. And a group of us were in Mahabaleshwar. I think Al Grasso and Beverly were among our group. And we came to the spot and we actually identified the rocks that Mehera and Baba are standing in front of. So to prove it, I had Beverly and Al stand like Mehera and Baba and took a photograph to record the spot. It's called Ling Mala, is the name of the waterfall. And at that time in 1971, I was in Palo Alto and I was studying to be a Montessori teacher. At the recommendation of Agnes, she encouraged me to do that. And it was a teacher training course in International Montessori Association. And the teacher, Miss Lena Wickramaratne, was from Sri Lanka. And she was basically a disciple of Maria Montessori. She had, as a young girl, she had come to India and studied with Maria during World War II. And all she wanted to do was promote Montessori. So she had built this beautiful school in Palo Alto. And we had a lot of, and so I was taking her course and it had a beautiful garden that was part of the school. And she, after a 1 year of study, I was a 2-year program. And after 1 year of study, she asked me to teach in the school. And so I had the pink room with the kids. And she also brought in Sri Lankan women that she had trained in Montessori to teach in the school. So I was friends with these women from Sri Lanka. So that is just part of the introduction to this experience I had. So at that time, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was in Big Sur, which I don't know if you've been there, but it's one of my favorite places in California, where the mountains fall off into the ocean. It's very rugged coastline, but very majestic. And the redwood forests are there. And there's a little part of Big Sur where the Little Sur River flows into the ocean. And there's actually a big meadow along the river, and you're allowed to hike in there and pitch a tent and camp. Maybe even today you can still do that. So in this dream I had, I was with one of the teachers. Her name is Nanda. And we were walking on this forest path at night, and the stars were really bright. and you could hear the sound of the Little Sur River that was not a big river, but it was the riparian part of it was, had many trees. But we were walking on this path with these bright stars and hear the sound of the water. And in front of us, walking also with us, was Baba and Mehera. And it was a very intimate, friendly atmosphere, beautiful. And we were just chatting. And we continued to walk along this forest path that led us to the beach, because the Little Sur River empties into the Pacific Ocean. And so we're walking over the sand dunes, and we walk up towards the ocean, and Baba walks all the way to the edge of the water and turns around. And the three of us stood there looking at him. And to each of us, he gave instructions. To Nanda, to Mehera, and myself. And I only remember what I experienced, what he told me. So when it was my turn, I asked him, I said, well, what can I do for you? And his reply was, do something to make Mehera happy. And then he turned and he just walked into the ocean until we couldn't see him no more, and left us weeping on the beach. And then in 1975, I moved to Meherabad, and I ended up living at Meherabad with Agnes for 2.5 years almost. And I had a job down below in this little town called Santa Paula. And while I was there, part of the reason I couldn't make it to India because I didn't have the money. And while I was at Meherabad, my grandmother in Texas died, and I inherited enough money to buy a ticket to come here. And so I was very excited. I bought a camera, a nice Pentax camera to bring on the trip. But I had this job, and in America, they're vacation time, so I only had 2 weeks. So I bought a ticket, and I was able to be here at Meherabad for 10 days. And early on, one of the early days of my stay, Eric Nadel, the husband of Heather Nadel, and we took a rickshaw to go to Meherazad. And I was just kind of in bliss the whole time. And other pilgrims had arrived earlier than us. We were later arrivals. But in those days, you could you could spend all day at Meherazad. You had to leave by 5. And so when we arrived, Pendu was sitting in that chair by the blue bus. And Erico walked up to Pendu, and he told Pendu, he said, this is the person that brought me to Meherabad. And then he walked away. And I told Pendu, I said, I didn't know that. And Pendu said, oh, that's good. And then later, we were in the back behind Baba's house where the kitchen is. And he introduced me to Naja. And we're standing there, and I asked Naja, I said, well, where's Mehera? And I think to explain what was happening was that there's a woman, a Baba lover named Carrie Bills. And she at that time was caretaking her house cleaner and cook for Elizabeth and Kitty. And she was coming to India. I don't know if it was her first trip to India also. And I think what had happened is that Elizabeth had written to Mehera and said, please teach her how to make good chapatis. And so when I asked Naja, I said, "Where's Mehera?" There's a little cookhouse across from the kitchen under this beautiful big neem tree that Mehera used to admire. And in the cookhouse, they just have a plain fire. Even today, they still have this cookhouse as it was at that time. It's a tiny space. And they cook chapatis and bakri and make beautiful flatbreads in that cookhouse. And one of the village women from Pippelgown would be doing the cooking. But on that day, Mehera was inside this little hut, this little cookhouse, and there was a few pilgrims there, and they were all squatting around because it was a very close and tight space. And I think it was just women with her. And she was, as the woman from Pimplegan was making the chapatis, she was describing what she was doing and teaching Carrie that way how to make chapatis for Elizabeth and Kitty. And Mehera was squatting right by the entrance, by the door. So I just went straight up, excuse me. I just went straight up there and squatted next to her, which means I was like a foot away from her. And she just turned around and looked at me and said, "You know not to touch me." I said, "Yes, Mehera." So that's how I physically met Mehera for the first time. And in those days, Mehera would come out on her porch and spend time with us, starting around 11 in the morning. And so I took every opportunity I had to spend time with her. In fact, Money was trying to get my attention, and she wanted to talk to me, and I said, no, I want to be here with Mehera. And Money actually created a ruse to get me to go, to spend a little time with me and get to know me. But that's another story I can tell for another time. And so I remember one time I was on the porch with Mehera, and she looked directly at me and she said, "You pray that you can be with him when he comes again in 700 years. And when she said 700 years, my face fell, and she noticed. And she had this twinkle in her eyes, and she said, no, 700 years, that's a very short period of time. And I burst out laughing, and she was laughing, because she was trying to convince me that 700 years is a short period of time. And yet every moment she was missing Baba so intensely. But we both had a good laugh. And this was my first trip to India. And in the 60s, there was a book called The Ugly American. And I never read it, but I knew what the subject matter was, how Americans go to foreign countries and drink beer and wear shorts and are very rude and loud and obnoxious. And I, in my mind, excuse me, just a minute, I have to pick up something. In my mind, I thought, I don't want to be an ugly American. So I was very sensitive to doing everything I thought that was proper according to Indian culture. And I really think that, I don't know if she knew she could do it, but she was so intuitive that basically she could read my mind. And so one day she said to all of us, she said, you can live your whole life here, means in India, and yet you can't comprehend, you can't understand all the different nuances and the different approaches to culture and all that. She didn't say it exactly in those words, but that's the essence of what she was telling us. So she was saying that even for herself, she couldn't do it. And that made me relax because I thought, oh, well, if Mehera can't do it, then who am I to think that I can? So I wasn't quite so uptight about it. And then another day on the porch with her, she looked at me and she said, I know a good job for you. So when you go back to Meherabad, you know, all those white stones that line the path that goes to the Samadhi. She said, turn over those stones and kill all the scorpions. And so I did that. And in those days, almost every single stone had a scorpion underneath it. And I remember one was a mother scorpion that had little scorpion babies on its back that I crushed. And then the next time I was at Meherazad, Mehera asked me, did you do it? And I said, yes, Mehera, I did. And in fact, there was a scorpion this big. And she said, no, they're not that big. she called that my exaggeration. And then another notion I had that in my, excuse me, in my earlier life, once I left home, I had all different kinds of notions about diets. So I followed a macrobiotic diet, and then I switched to a fruitarian diet, and I was a vegetarian, and many different things. And so I had, excuse me, I had this notion that it was more spiritual to be eating vegetarian. And so again, I think Mehera read my mind. And she told us the story. And she said that when they were in Pune and it was time for Baba to go, he would invite all his lovers to see him off in Bun Garden, which is right up the road from Guru Prasad and along the river. So she said that there would be two cars, and Baba would have one car, and the women were in another car, and their car, the women's car, would park on the bridge so they could look down on Bun Garden and see Baba and all his lovers. And she said, eventually when Baba departed, the two cars would get on the Naga Road. And then somewhere out in the countryside, the cars would stop and Baba would get in the women's car. And then they'd proceed to Meherabad. But along the way, they had packed a picnic. But I think they just ate while they were driving. So Mehera says, well, we made delicious vegetarian sandwich for Baba. And then with a smile, she said, but we had the most delicious mutton sandwiches. And it made me think, well, if Mehera can enjoy eating mutton, then who am I to think that being a vegetarian is more spiritual? And then I wanted to share a story one day with Mehera. And in Santa Cruz, there was a little house that was devoted to the painting The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. And in this little house, you could walk in and there was a beautiful replication of the painting of The Last Supper. And then you could push a button and listen to a story that was recorded. And so in the story, which I was telling Mehera, I said that one day a friend of Leonardo's came to look at the painting. And the person, the friend of Leonardo, told him, that vase on the table is magnificent. It's just beautiful. And the friend left. And as soon as the friend was gone, Leonardo painted out the vase. He removed it. So I'm telling this story to Mehera, and at the end of the story, she doesn't understand the point of the story. So I told it again a second time. And at the end of that second telling of the story, again, she didn't understand. But she was persistent. She wanted to know why I was telling her this story. And Eric, who was next to me, and he said, don't say they, say was. And so the third time I told this story, I said was, and Mehera said, oh, I see. Thank you so much for telling me this story. And as I said, at that time in Meherabad, we could be there all day, and Eretz would go into Mandali Hall, I don't know, maybe it was 9 in the morning, and tell stories all morning long. And I would sit by the big doors that were next to the women's side that opened up into Mehera's garden. And so I'd be listening to Eretz's stories, but out of the corner of my eye, I was looking at Mehera's porch to see when she would come. And as soon as she would come, I would stand up and leave and be with Mehera. And I think I just got the feeling that Erich was a little irritated because he noticed that I would consistently do that. And then another day, Mehera was telling us a story. And the story was, it could have taken place in Lucknow. And she said there was a competition of poets, and they had a competition to see who was the best poet. And so these poets, this is at night, late at night, they're having this competition to decide who's the best poet in Lucknow. And they're reading ghazals, and they were all fine ghazals, and everyone really appreciated them. But then when they were finished, everyone had read their ghazal. They said, what's that? Hello?
Don't worry about it. It was somebody.
Okay.
I muted them. You're good.
Okay. So there was this competition. And at the end of the competition, everyone looked around and said, well, yeah, but we can't decide who's the best poet unless Jigger. She didn't mention the name. She said that another poet has to be called, and he has to read also. So they went looking out at night, late at night, for Jigger. I think it was Jigger. And they found him, and he was drunk, totally inebriated. But they dragged him to their competition, and he read his ghazal. And they all declared that he was the best poet. And this is my impression that Mehera told me the story, and she said, I had the feeling that she told it to kind of loosen me up, that I had other notions that needed to be relaxed also. And then I came back here in 1979, 1980 to Meherabad, and I just married Ellen Sugawara. And I wanted to bring her to Meherabad as soon as I could. So it was about 6 months after we married. And she's a really fine gardener, and she studied with the same Englishman, Alan Chadwick, that I'd studied with. And I should say that after my first trip here, I was in such a state of bliss. And as I told you, my goal was to get closer to Baba. And so I knew at that point in 1977, this is where I should be. I should live here. But I didn't have the means to do it. And then to complicate matters, I married Ellen, and she was a really fine gardener. And I have a background in organic gardening and horticulture and sustainable agriculture and all that. And so I thought I'd bring her here, and she'd have the same feelings for Meherabad. And we could both happily live here and garden, take care of the garden. But to my disappointment, when we first arrived in India, she had culture shock. And it's a long story, and she wasn't happy being here. And it was a big disappointment for me. And we were having personal difficulties also. And the mandali knew it. Those days, there was no pilgrim center. So we rented a house in Kedgaon, which is a town close to Meherabad. And we'd ride bicycles through the fields to get to Meherabad. And in those days, we'd ride bicycles all the way to Meherazad. And there was very little traffic, and it was a pleasant ride. And yet, Ellen was not happy to be here. And so when it was time for us to leave, she didn't even go to Meherabad to say farewell, but I did. And Mehera told me, she said, tell her that she's very blessed to have come here. And I was feeling guilty that it must be my fault, that she didn't have a good experience here. And then Mehera looks at me and she says, you love Baba very much, or you love Baba, you love him. I think she said that. You love him very much. And I didn't feel it because I was, as I say, I was feeling guilty that she didn't have a good experience here. So so I just looked at the ground and didn't respond. And Mehera just went into this other space. It was like she was in another world and eventually just drifted off. But I can still picture her reaction. And then Ellen and I didn't want to go directly back to the US. So we found work in England, having to do with gardening. She was teaching a course at a Rudolf Steiner school. And I was gardening in the local estates in this little village in England called Forest Row. And then after 6 months, we had to leave. And so we rode bicycles through France, and we had other work in Italy, renovating the gardens of this old villa called Villa Fagina in a little village called Monterosso in Liguria. And at the time, I don't think I knew it, but Baba said, there are 4 main spiritual centers in Europe, and one of them's in Liguria. And down the coast, if you climb the mountain, you could see Portofino and Santa Margherita, where Baba had spent time with his early Western lovers. And so we were in this little village in a region, again, it looked similar to Big Sur, where the mountains fall off into the sea. But over the centuries, the Italians had terraced the hillside and planted grapes. But it was so steep in some places that they would harvest the grapes and put them in boats and take them out that way. And so while I was there, we were staying in this Villa Fagina, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was climbing up these terraces. So I would come to one terrace and I'd lift myself or push myself up to the next level. And I was climbing up one terrace after another. And I was pushing myself up, and I looked, my head was just above the height of the terrace, and I could see there was a big, beautiful meadow. And the women mandali were having a picnic there in my dream. And my natural inclination would be just to go back down and not disturb them. But since I had lifted myself up enough, they had spotted me. And they said, oh, look, there's Bif. So I had to stand up and show myself. And Mehera stood up and she came over and embraced me. And when she embraced me, all the other women let out an exclamation of horror that she'd embraced me. And as Mehera's embracing me, she whispers in my ear, Baba's not like that. And so she gave me that experience also. Baba gave me that experience with her. And then eventually, Ellen and I came back to the United States, and I wanted to study the scientific side of horticulture. So I got accepted to UC Davis, and there's many stories that happened because of that. And eventually I got involved in the sustainable agriculture program. We actually pushed the university in that direction, and eventually the whole state. But that's a story for another time. And then our marriage was declining, and Ellen asked for a divorce. And for me, it was kind of a relief because I wanted to be here at Meherabad. And so I accepted her decision. And we were divorced. But it was a rough time for me. And it was a period of 7 years that I couldn't come here to Meherabad. And I was really missing it. And you could say I was suffering quite a lot. And so I think it was 1985 at night, I woke up, and at 2 a.m, and this poem just flowed out of me. And I wrote it down on a scrap of paper. And in 1987, finally, I was able to come back to Meherabad. And so on the porch with Mehera, I told Mehera, I said, Mehera, I have a poem. And she said, yes, go ahead and read it. And so I read this poem, which I'll read to you. It says, November 20th, 1984, 2 a.m. That's when it was written. How can I ever be lonely? How can I ever be alone? When you are there, when you are always with me, my life's struggles tear at me relentlessly, yet how can I miss you? Can't I see your darling face, which is eternally smiling, always helpful, always caring, encouraging the bright side, to laugh, to play, to love in friendship, to love in godhood, to love eternally, to love gracefully with nobility and bearing, to push the heart forward, to love more and more fully, to fill up the space, the empty cracks, the forgotten places where love has lain hiding, long forgotten and dormant. Now love is awakening and filling the spaces, the forgotten places, to love you forever, my darling, one and eternal. To shed the tears of blood, glistening and sweet, shining and glowing, to awaken the sleepy, the lazy, the uncaring, to love you forever, my darling, one and eternal. For God is your right and my right long forgotten. You have taken the time to bend to my anthood, to stoop so low, to reach me as I am. And there we are set, struggling and wrestling. You pull and I balk, more stubborn than a mule. Yet what keeps me resisting? Why not run to your outstretched arms? Why not be enfolded in your eternal embrace? What ancient ritual keeps me from you? My fishhood, my anthood, my elephanthood, my manhood? Kiss me as you have never kissed me before. Embrace me with the warmth of 1,000 caressing mothers. Let me weep the tears of 1,000 babies. I want you, my beloved. I want you forever and a day. And may that day last forever and ever and ever. So I read that poem, and I was reading it from the scrap of paper that I had found at 2 a.m. And Mehera said, I want you to write out nicely this poem and give it to me. So Heather had this nice stationery that has Baba's face on it. And I used my best penmanship. And I was able to give this to Mehera. And just to end this part of the story, that after Mehera passed, Meru came to me with this. And she returned it to me, but she hesitated. It was like she wanted to keep it for herself, but she overcame that urge and handed it to me. So this is one of my great Baba treasures that was appreciated by Mehera, and now it's with me. And I at some point when I was there, I actually can't remember where it took place, but it felt like I was alone with Mehera, which I don't think actually happened, but it felt that way. And Mehera was talking to me directly, and somehow she intuited that I had been suffering a lot. And Mehera said, Baba is only interested in helping you spiritually. That is the only reason he comes. And I was a little shocked at the time, thinking that all these other aspects of my life, he doesn't really care that much. That he's totally focused without 100%. He's 100% focused on helping us spiritually, and whatever it takes to help us spiritually, that's what he's going to encourage to have happen. And at this time also, we could spend all day at Meherabad. And we would have lunch there, and then Alaba would ring a bell, and I think at 3, he would serve tea, we'd have tea. And then fairly often, a messenger would come from the women's side to me, and the message was, Meru wants to play volleyball. And so there was a little volleyball net in the garden, and there were 2 on the team, and I was always on the team opposed to Meru. And we were playing in the afternoon. In the afternoon, Mehera would come out on the porch. And so there was quite a few people sitting around Mehera, maybe 20 people. And we were down in the garden playing volleyball. So it was a very natural, beautiful scene. And in those days, you could see Seclusion Hill from the garden very clearly. And I don't know what gave me the notion, but as we're playing volleyball, I decided to hit the ball as high as I could over the net. And it would be returned, and then I'd hit it again as high as I could. And my back was to Mehera's porch. But I could hear there was chatter. You know, people were speaking with Mehera, and then all of a sudden became quiet. And I had the impression that Mehera was intrigued, and she was just watching me hit this volleyball as high as I could over the net. And then in 1987, Mehera's birthday was coming up, and the play for her birthday, which was performed in the amphitheater below the Samadhi, was the story of Mirabai, the great saint that the women monthly loved so much. And even though she lived hundreds of years ago, the songs of Mirabai are still appreciated and loved here in India. And the women loved her very much. And Mehera took great interest in this play for her own birthday. And so Janet Luck was chosen to play Mirabai. And Mehera taught her how to sing and dance and to sing in Hindi even. And they had all these different parts, and I was approached. I think Heather approached me and said, do you want to be in the play? We need 3 sadhus. You can be a sadhu. And I was designated the main sadhu in the play for Mehera's birthday. And I remember after I had accepted and said, yes, I'll be in the play, I saw Meru, and I said, Meru, look at me. You know, I had a belly. and she said, oh, it's so, you know, I said, how can I be a sadhu? Look at this belly. And Galir said, oh, it's okay. We have well-fed sadhus these days. That was her reply. And then for the play, I think it was Donald Mahler, who was one of Margaret's dancers. He was here. And so they painted my whole body black. He had like this paint with a sponge, and he went over my whole body, and I was very black. And in the play, I was bare-chested, and one of the mandali jungli master wrapped a dhoti around my waist, which Gandhi used to wear sometimes. I think Baba didn't really like dhotis. But anyway, in the play, that's what I wore. And I was bare-chested and had beads, and I had dreadlocks. I had a wig. And when I was, and marks on my forehead. And when I was in costume, nobody could recognize me. And so when I did my part in the play, there was a statue of Krishna. And this sadhu was the protector of this statue that had been worshipped for hundreds of years. And he has a dream, and in the dream, he realizes that this statue is meant for a special soul. So he goes wandering around India looking for the special soul. And in a little village, he sees a mother and a little girl. And he recognizes the little girl as the one that the statue is meant for. So he gives the statue to little Mira, and she falls in love with it. It's the beginning of her love for Krishna. And later, after the play, when he told me that when I was on stage, Mira whispered to Mani, so who is that? Who is that? Because she had to approve all of the actors in the play, even she was that involved. And she had to okay all the costumes and all that. And I remember after the whole play where all the actors were on stage, and Mehera and Mani stood up, and Mani spoke for Mehera. And Mehera said, I will always remember this. She was very touched. And then I didn't know at the time, but this was going to be my last time with Mehera in 1987. And so on the day I was to leave, I was at Meherazad. And in those days, when you were leaving, there was a queue to say goodbye to Mehera. So I think I was toward the end of the queue. And when it was my turn, Mehera had this little plastic bag of prasad, the yellow candies. And I put out my hands, and she was holding the prasad and twisting it. And the bag would turn this way and turn back like this and this. And I was looking at her, and we were having a conversation. And Meru was there also, and she had some point that she wanted to make that Mehera was ignoring. And the whole time Mehera was twisting this bag of prasad back and forth, back and forth. And then she looks at me with a twinkle in her eyes. No, sorry. She looks at me seriously. Excuse me. And she says, you love Baba very much. This is 7 years after she had said that to me previously. You love him very much. I think she said him, it's not Baba. You love him very much. And I looked at her and I said, yes, Mehera. And then she had a twinkle in her eyes, and she said, but he loves you more than you can ever love him. And I said, yes, Mehera. And that was my last physical time with her. And then there's a few other experiences I want to share with you of Mehera. And so there, I think it was in 1992, I was in Assisi working for a Baba lover, Valeria Violati, who had a property in an area outside of Assisi called, the area was called Paradiso. And the place where she owned is also called Paradiso. And previous to that, coming to work for her in Italy, I had spent, I think, 6 months in Meherabad. And I'd met this young girl who had come with Valeria for the first time to Meherabad, and she was in a state of bliss. Her name was Sophia. And she was just ecstatic. And she was in Meherabad for quite a long time. And I think I only had one conversation with her the whole time she was here. But she stayed on and on at Meherabad, and she didn't want to go back to Australia right away. So after the Pilgrim Center closed on the 15th of March, she went to Assisi and she got work on the main piazza in Assisi and was working there, waiting for the Pilgrim Center to reopen and then return to Meherabad. And I was already there in Assisi. So I thought I'd go and surprise her. So I went into the little tourist shop where she was working, and she was bending over getting something for a customer. And in a very loud, gruff voice, I said, "You got any Baba books in here?" And she was startled. But then after that, after she'd get off work, we would have some fun. And I remember one day after work, I said, "What do we do this evening?" And she said, "Let's go to Vespers." And on one end of the main piazza in Assisi, there's the Basilica of Santa Chiara. And Claire was the main woman disciple of St. Francis. And I had gone there when we were in Monterosso in the 1980s. We came to Assisi, my first experience coming to Assisi. And her body was on display, even though she had died in the 1200s. There was a coffin in the main part of the basilica, and you could see her body. It was a glass cover. But at this time, when I was there in 92, it wasn't a glass cover anymore. And she had started an order, Claire had started an order of nuns that were cloistered. But in the evenings, they would sing. So there was a little alcove, and there's a little room, and you could sit in there. And then there was a grill, and the nuns would stand behind the grill, so you could just kind of see their outline, but you couldn't see them clearly. And they would sing, and it was angelic, it was divine, it was beautiful. And I remember tears coming down my cheeks, and I'm thinking, "Oh, Baba, I'm doing everything I can for you, but it's not enough." And then when the singing was finished, I quietly told a joke to Sophia, who was sitting next to me, and she didn't respond in any way. So I didn't want to disturb her, so I got up, and the other people in the room got up, and we left. And it was in the evening, so there was a side door, and you could go out. And there was those flying buttresses, the brickwork that in those days would support heavy walls, so they didn't collapse. But they made like an arch. So I was standing under one of those arches, and it was a beautiful night, starry night. And after a long time, Sophia came out to join me. And I said, "Oh, it was so beautiful in there." And she said, "But I was afraid." And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "While I was sitting there, Baba and Mehera came and lifted me up out of my body. And I didn't know how to get back in, so I was frightened. But apparently she figured it out, and she did re-enter her body. And then she turns to me and she said, Baba and Mehera want you to know that even though you don't see them, they're always with you. And that felt like a great blessing. And one last story is when Meru was invited to the West, her, I think one and only, well, she came with Baba, but after Baba dropped the body, the only time she came to the West, she went to Australia. And then my friend Kevin Dwyer escorted her from Australia to Hawaii, where he was living with his wife. And she spent time in Hawaii, and then she went on to the West Coast and then to Myrtle Beach. And we were here in India, so they took the opportunity to paint her room while she was gone. And they asked Peter Booth and I to do it. And I'd been trained by Chris Pearson. I've actually painted Baba's room at Meherabad 3 times with Chris. And he's very particular on how things are done. So we were doing it very carefully. And this little tiny room, it took us 3 weeks to finish the job. And so we were in there in the hot summer and sweating and covered, because we have to sand the walls and all that. And so we're covered in dust. And Arnavas was staying in the room, in the little bungalow across from Meru's room. So one day I came out of the Meru's room all hot and dusty, and I bumped into Arnavas. And Arnavas said, oh, I just had a dream about you. And she sat me down on Mehera's porch and she told me this dream. So she said in the dream I had done a painting. And when she said that, I laughed and I said, oh, my only experience of painting in this life is feelings of frustration. And she just brushed it off and said, oh, well, you must have been an artist in a previous life. But in the dream, I had done a painting. And she said it was half abstract and half real. And she said that I had painted the gate of Meherabad. And I'd painted a white horse and I'd painted Baba. So in the dream, she's holding the painting and Mehera walks by and says, what's this? And Arnava says, oh, Bif has done a painting. So Mehera picks up the painting and holds it close to her face. And Arnavas is saying, look, there's the gate, there's the white horse, and there's Baba. And Mehera says, but where's Bif? And so Arnavas felt she had to go find me. So she goes back to the little bungalow, and on the back of the little bungalow, close to the inside, there's a veranda where Money used to have her office. And there's little posts also. So I was hiding behind one of the posts and I jumped out to surprise Arnavas. And Arnavas saw me and she said, oh, there's Bif. I'll have to go back and tell Mehera. Mehera had been quietly walking behind Arnavas. So she answered. And Arnavas just became ecstatic to see her once again. So those are some of my stories with Mehera. Margi, say something.
I'm here, Bif. Thank you. And I also love the cacophony of the Meherabad birds that are behind you.
Yeah, we planted thousands of trees up here, and it's really been a haven for all these beautiful birds. Even in the hot summer, they managed to be here and add color and song to Meherabad.
Yeah, it made all your stories better. It sort of like gave background.
Yeah,
Well, Biff, are you okay if I open it up for questions for people?
sure.
Well, does anybody have any questions for Biff that they want to have answered? He can't tell you how to achieve God realization, so don't ask. But okay. All right, Rich, go ahead.
I have a very simple question. What does BIF stand for? Not,
Well, you want the whole story?
yeah, well, at least
Okay.
half and 75%, whatever.
Okay, so I tell people that BIF is short for bifidus, and bifidus is a beneficial intestinal bacteria. And both of my parents were naturopathic doctors. So there's actually a story with Mehera, because she was kind of put off by my name, Bif. And I was going to tell this story to Mehera, and Erico shook his head vehemently and advised me not to, so I didn't. But she said, "Oh, don't you have another name?" So my father decided that I had an informal name and a formal name. So I'm Bif William Lee Soper. But anyway, they were introduced to me as Bif. So when I was first there, I remember being in the garden, and Arnavas came up to me and said, "Well, why is your name Bif?" Because we read these English novels, and to biff someone means to hit them. and so I went with it, and I said, "Well, they named me that because I love to beat up people." So apparently at lunchtime, the women would have lunch together, and Arnavas must have told all the women, "Well, this new guy likes to beat up people." So I was in the back of the garden in the afternoon, and Meru comes up and he said, "Do you really like to beat up people?" And I started laughing. But then to finish the story, so the real, I tell that first story that I told you just to see how gullible people are. And a lot of people go with it. But the real story is that my father was from a small town in Iowa, Eldora, Iowa. And he was a star quarterback before World War II. And so he loved football. And in the Midwest, there was a famous football coach that was very good named Biff. So he named me after this coach. I never looked him up. I don't know his story. But in my life, I played 5 years of American football. And in 5 years, my teams lost one game. So I guess I was named appropriately.
Thank you, Biff. Thank you.
Yeah, I will
Welcome.
say when I was a teenager, so I met Biff my first trip to India. I was 14 and I was there in the off season, and I don't know, maybe Biff felt bad for me, but he came and played cards with me every single day at Savage's Kitchen.
We played hearts. The
Yeah,
game was
Sasha
hearts.
Alvarado, Will West, and I all played. It was like sitting in a blast furnace. But I didn't know until, so I met Biff the first time when I was 14, and then I went back to India like sometimes twice a year until last year, really. But so I didn't know until I was like 18 that he wasn't named after a stomach bacteria. It took me all
Oh,
those
really?
years and all those
Wow.
trips to know that. And I would tell
Yeah.
people that. Like I would say, Biff's named after.
So I started a rumor.
Yeah.
Well, you're head of the list of the gullible ones then.
All right, let's go to, is it Anne or Elizabeth? I thought, is it not Anne?
No, it's Anne Elizabeth, but I go by Elizabeth, so
Okay.
I don't really use my first name unless I'm writing something. Anyway, Biff, I loved all your stories. The last one I couldn't understand the last several sentences because the internet, at least where I am, it didn't come through, so I didn't hear the punchline of the story where Arnavas had the dream, and it was the last several lines. I was just wondering if you could repeat that.
Sure. Did you hear the part where Mehera asked Arnavas, "Where is Biff?"
Right, and you were hiding.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then she went back to the little bungalow looking for me and went out into the veranda where Money had her office. And I was hiding behind a post. So I jumped out to surprise her. So she was nonchalant about it and thought, well, now I'll go back and tell Mehera where he is. But Mehera had quietly been walking behind her. So Mehera leans out to the side with her hands folded and says, Jai Baba Bif. And Arnavas says that when she said that, then I saw her again, that I became ecstatic.
That was the end of the dream?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Biff, you got some good stories.
So I just a thought I had that, as you can see, I was very attracted to Mehera. And for me, she's the best example of how to love him. Because Baba says she's the only one that loves me as I ought to be loved. So it's such a great blessing to have these personal experiences with her and see in what a natural way she lived her life in complete focus and dedication and love for the beloved.
Yeah. Thank you, Biff. Thank you so much for telling. These stories are so valuable. I'm glad that they're finally getting recorded somewhere.
You're doing Baba's work.
No, you are. All right, Jeff's got his hand up. Let's give the old guy the microphone.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if you heard this, and I was just wondering, but I remember Adi, this is back in the early 70s. He was an expert on God Speaks, and and in God Speaks, there's the, you know, where Baba talks about different roles that are played around Baba. And, you know, someone plays the role of Peter, someone plays the role of John, and, you know, so forth. And one day he told us that Baba had said that Mehera is always the same one. She comes again and again. She does, it's not a different soul that plays Mehera each time. It's always the same soul. And you know, he said that, and he said that on several occasions. Oh, did you miss what miss hearing what I
You're
said?
breaking up a little bit.
Oh, what didn't you hear?
Right. No, I know what you're speaking about, and
so,
and I agree with you. I think that's true.
I just assumed that, you know, I never heard any.
Yeah, I understand. I know you yeah, you're breaking up again, but can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, Biff, I think it might be your connection.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just having, the only one I'm having trouble with is Jeff, but I know what he's referring to, and I agree with him. I think it's true that she's the same one, and my logical mind references where Baba told her. He said, "You as Mehera love me more than Radha loved Krishna." And Meru, there's a beautiful video that Casey made for Mehera, about Mehera. And in it, Meru said, you know, Mehera would pray to Baba, make me worthy of your love. Because she didn't feel worthy of all the love that Baba showered on her. So she would pray, Baba, make me worthy of your love. And Meru said, and also every day she would try to love him more. So when Baba said, you, Mehera, as Mehera loved me more than Radha loved Krishna, then it makes sense, because it's been, what, 5,000 years that she's been loving him more. So that's my logical mind speaking through my heart.
And Mehera once said that she felt she had always been a woman. You probably maybe read that.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah,
So I agree. I think it's true.
yeah.
Okay, Diane and Terry.
Hi, Biff.
Hi.
I've never heard a man tell stories about Mara with the sort of intimacy and I don't know, it was just so touching. Your memory is, first of all, off the charts, unbelievable. What a gift. So I'm so glad that Margie had you do all this, so it's now recorded. But did you ever feel that you had a relationship with her as a man that was different than other males? Because like I said, I've never heard of such affection and firsthand experience.
Well, in my life, I try not to compare myself to others. I figure that spiritually, it's a negative thing to do. so I don't really think about that. I couldn't say. I know that there were many men that had spent time with Mira and appreciated her. And Alan Talbot told me that he was alone with her in Baba's room for 45 minutes once. And she went around the whole room and told stories about everything that's there in the room. And he just kept quiet. And she just regaled him in this beautiful litany of stories of all the things in Baba's room. I know that Peter Booth used to, and some of the men, I think Alan also, they in the early days, they could have tea with Mira also. But I know that Peter said that he didn't really appreciate the mandali for who they were.
Uh-oh. Looks like Biff's connection.
When he first met them. I don't have an answer. I haven't thought about it.
I think that's an answer. Does that suffice, Diane?
Yes, it was wonderful. I appreciate
Best
it.
I can do.
Thank you.
Biff, there was a question in the chat that said, did you get any special insight from Mara that you can share? Oh no, Biff's on India internet.
No, he started observing silence.
Uh-oh, I hope his connection catches up. It might be kind of wonky. I also know it's getting hot, so his iPad might be overheating.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, as the day goes on. Uh-oh. Biff! Oh, I hear him.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Maybe
he
it's
just got,
baked.
he just got God realized. That's it. That's the end of Bif Soper. Everybody who's watching this on YouTube or here, that was the end of Bif Soper. He just vanished into oblivion.
Well,
Hey, I wanted to congratulate you, Margie, on your new situation.
Thank you.
I'm really happy for you. I'm very happy for you. Really happy for you.
I'm very happy too. I'm
Good.
very, very happy. Thank you
Good.
so
Excellent.
much. And I know you think it's a boy, Richard, but I think
Yep.
that you're wrong.
Oh no,
I
it
got your
is.
email.
I'm making a prediction. It's a boy. Yes.
Mm,
Prediction.
we'll see.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I guess that's the end of the late night chat. Wait, let me just message Biff and see if his iPad died or what, because I have a feeling it probably overheated.
He's back,
He's back.
just not on camera. He's back.
Hi, Biff.
oh, yeah,
Can you
there's
hear us? Uh-oh.
hey, William.
Bifidus.
Oh no. He's not muted. I think it's his iPad. Oh well. Well, we can still tell Biff we love him. We love you, Biff. Hopefully he'll come back on, but yeah, I'm hoping to get
No
Biff on.
audio. He has no audio. Biff doesn't. If you look at his thing under participants list, oh, he's
Done.
left now.
Left now.
Yeah.
I messaged him. Well, so my next hope is for next month to get Biff to come back. Sorry, I hope Biff will come back because I don't know if you guys know this, but he also helped take care of Mohammed the Must. And so now I'm hoping that he'll tell some of Mohammed the Must stories.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any way for him to do it, but he has this really, really, really rare video that he took of Erico giving Mohammed a bath. That he showed us when I was probably like 15 or so. He showed a bunch of like, it was like all the Foleys and I were in Meherabad, and we got to see this video, and it's like a video that not many people have seen. So I don't know. I would have to talk to him to see if we can get it up online. But it's really funny. It's really, really funny. But yes, so I'm hoping next month that Biff will come back. But yeah. Well, guys, I think that's all we got for the late night chat tonight, unless somebody has something. No closing.
I have a question. Is Biff the person who handles all the I may have gotten him mixed up with someone, all the meals at Meherabad?
No, that's Alan. Wait, hold on one second.
Alan. Okay.
Thanks for calling me. Hi, Biff. Hi. Yeah, that's what I thought. Here. Okay, so so his iPad got too hot. So he's on speakerphone, guys.
Okay,
So
okay.
people can hear you. So we're about to close up.
Okay.
We were just all thanking you, even though you weren't here. Is there anything else you want to say?
Jai Meher Baba.
Jay Baba.
Hey, Baba.
Hey, Baba.
Thank you so much, Biff.
Thank you.
And Biff, I don't know if you agree to this, but I promised you in a month to these people, so you can't let them down.
What about Muhammad's video? Ask about.
That I promised for you to come back in a month.
Yeah, it's wonderful to share stories, Baba.
Yeah, we'll plan it out. We'll get it sorted.
I got a question for Biff.
Oh, Adrian has a question for you, Biff.
Hey Biff, why are you so great?
We're here to shrink our egos, so
Hey, Biff, I have another question.
cite many examples where I'm not so great.
Okay,
Good, that's good.
Alan,
That was a trick question.
Hey, Biff, it's me. I don't know if you remember me.
Of course he remembers you.
Well, maybe he doesn't.
Who is
But-
it?
it's Alan. Adrian.
Okay.
Adrian's husband.
Okay.
Well, I met you in February of 2023, I think, wasn't it? Or 2022?
2023.
2023. And we were sitting together and
Wait. Okay, I wasn't sure which Adrian. Yeah, I know you very well.
Yeah, we all know each other very well.
yes. So I've been thinking about it, and I thought about it here and there to myself lately that I had asked you. I sat next to you and you're eating, and I said, hey Biff, I want to know, like, how is it that we're all sitting around here talking about Baba, and one of us will just like blow up into sobbing or throw a chair or scream, or something will happen where we're just we're like feeling Baba's love so intensely, and I'm sure that you are as well. But how is it that you keep your composure and your poise? Or I don't see, there was no expression that entire trip that I saw from you that was like, whether it was sadness or anger or happiness. I mean, it was like kind of an even keel. And so I'd asked you about that, and then you said, I don't know really much of what you're saying to me right now.
Do I?
But then you said, but I do make a prayer that I will. I don't know if I can tell you all of it, but you said something about Baba, may I be of service to you and love everyone, or something along those lines. And then I burst out into tears. When you said that, I just burst into uncontrollable sobbing, and I sobbed for about an hour and a half straight. And
Jesus Christ, Alan.
and
So
you
dramatic.
and you left me there, but it was but it was perfect because
You left me there.
it was perfect because I sat with that, and I guess it's a question about like what is that? Are we talking about equipoise? Are we talking about like what's going on, Biff? How?
You've never seen me really angry.
Oh,
No,
Biff can
I
get
haven't.
really angry. Biff can get really angry.
Yeah,
I
I've seen a little flavor.
I haven't seen it,
It's called Bif Spice.
but I guess it's like, you know, the feeling of being overwhelmed with Baba's love and bursting out into tears. It's like, does that happen to you? Has it happened since we've talked?
No. But the prayer that you're referring to is a semi-selfish prayer.
Uh-huh.
I asked Baba, fill my heart with your love so I can share it with others.
Oh yeah. That's
Yeah,
nice.
that
So
was
in
it.
the bargain, I get his love.
That's a little sneaky. That's kind of sneaky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, it was really helpful, and it still is.
Can I tell a story about Biff?
Please do. Because if
Describing.
we're gonna tell stories about Biff, we could go all night. I think we
Okay,
should.
well, this is just one to explain, express Biff's poise. So like one time we were driving to Mahabaleshwar and Biff was driving in his very old car, like those old ones. And
Fiat.
yeah, the Fiat. And there was even like,
When I was in.
no, and
Oh.
there was even holes in the bottom of the car.
One time driving back from Meherabad, I lost one of my sandals through the hole.
Okay, well, this is the story that I have to tell. So he's got his sandals, he's got his big plastic sliders, and he's in there, and we're driving, and we're on the winding roads of to get to Mahabaleshwar, and there's like trucks, and everybody's like almost driving off the edge of the cliffs, like every time there's a turn, and so we're driving, but then Biff's shoe gets stuck under the clutch. So he can't like fully like shift gears. And I was freaking out, and he was so incredibly calm and relaxed. And I just, and we survived to tell the tale. And we had the most amazing experience of my life in Mahabaleshwar. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, basically, thank you.
Thanks, Biff.
Jay,
Thanks,
Baba,
Biff.
You're
Yeah.
just the
I will
best.
say-
I got that part of the story.
I will say, I completely agree with Biff's anticlimactic responses or reactions to like major Baba moments. And I remember when I was like 18, I had this like profound Baba moment, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to tell Biff, because I was so used to Annie and Jeff, where you tell them like, oh, I saw a picture of Baba, and Annie goes, oh, unbelievable. And so I'm so excited to tell Biff, and I'm like running to see him in the morning, and he just goes, huh. All the wind out of my sails. And so I just chalk it up to Biff's been in Meherabad for so long that there's nothing. Wait, Biff, can you tell the story about the horse at the Samadhi really quickly?
Well, that's a different subject.
Okay, maybe next time.
No, I can tell it if you want.
Yeah, it's not that long, and it's a really funny story.
Okay, so Erico and Heather were living at Meherabad, and they actually had a room in Mandali Hall. And in those days, Mohammed must had a bed in Mandali Hall. And so the Mandali had allowed them to live there, but they decided that Erico should do night duty at the Samadhi every night. So he wasn't sleeping there at night. And so many years he was on the hill doing night duty. And Mansari was living there, and they had a village watchman also. So one evening, maybe around 10:30 or something, Erico was alone across from the samadhi. And all of a sudden he notices this black stallion that's in the area where people would take off their shoes. And the stallion was kind of craning its neck, looking towards the door of the samadhi. And Erico thought, well, that's odd, because I didn't hear the sounds of a horse coming, and all of a sudden there's this beautiful black stallion at Baba's samadhi. And then he noticed that the hoofs of the horse were floating maybe 6 inches off the ground. And he could also see through its body. And Erica would have experiences like that. And I'm not one that usually has experiences like that. So he was very excited. And so when the village watchman arrived, Erico tells him excitedly the story about this black stallion he had seen. And the watchman says, well, when did you see him? And Erico said, oh, it was around 10:30, 11, I saw him. And the village watchman says, oh, well, that's odd. Usually I don't see him until after midnight. But I always say, you know, Baba's master of the three, Baba's Lord of the three worlds. So we're in the gross world, but the other worlds also, those beings, they also want to come to Meherabad and have Baba's darshan. So sometimes they affect the atmosphere, you know, that there's a charged atmosphere out there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Biff. Thanks for bearing the hot sun for us.
I don't want it to be over.
I know. I want to keep Biff too.
I love you so much, Biff. You changed my life so many times, and my times in India with you were just shaped my life completely.
Well, it's all Baba's doing. So
Well, you know, thank you, Baba, for Biff, because he's pretty cool.
Yeah, Biff. I don't know how many India trips I would have not survived if it weren't for you.
I know. He's like rescuer of the young wayfarer in India.
Yeah.
that's a nice title. I like that one.
Yeah. Or the amount
101st name of God.
What'd you say?
The 101st name of God. You know,
Yeah.
Gave it to Biff.
You know, we're doing a translation of Meher Darshan, the book that Baba asked about to write in the last days of his life. And he said, I want you to write my life story in 10,000 couplets.
Mm.
And so we're doing this translation from Hindi, and Baba said you can write it in Hindi, so it's never been properly translated into English.
Mm.
So we're working on it, and Bao has these beautiful descriptions of who Baba is throughout epic poem. And so this Dabo, who knows 5 languages, he and I are working on Zoom currently on it. And once in a while, we see this beautiful description of how Baba, or Bao describes Baba. And we said, well, you know, there's the Zoroastrian prayer, the 101 names of God. But I think we can probably come up with the 1,001 names of God now.
Oh. Well, Biff, I think we should let you go, as much as I don't want it to be over. But so hopefully you'll come back in a month and tell Mohammed. Well, we'll talk, Biff, and we'll get
Okay.
it. We'll get it worked out. But let's
Yeah,
have. Go ahead.
It's very enjoyable. I enjoy participating.
Yeah, we love you here. Would it be possible to get that video of Mohammed being bathed by Erico?
What are you asking about it?
If it would be possible to share it on the late night chat.
I wouldn't know how to do that.
Okay, let's talk. I might be able to help you. Maybe we can get it.
Okay.
Okay, cool. All right, let's have a moment of silence and then we'll do Avatar Meherabad Ki Jai. Avatar Meherabad Ki Jai. Avatar
Avatar.
Meherabad.
Meherabad. EJ.
All right, everybody say bye to Biff.
Bye.
Biff.
Bye, Biff. Okay, I'm gonna hang up. All right, Jay Baba, thank
Hey,
you.
Baba.
Bye.
So
All right.
Margie,
Diane, what happened to
Margie,
your eye? What happened, Diane?